All right, so thanks again for joining. I'll just hop through the slides really quickly for our intro. I'm Paul, this is Moyez is here. We run the group, always open for any new ideas. Please feel free to reach out. Moyez and I are always hopping into other places where we can give back to the community, community projects, outreach, learning. Moyez, I think, just recently wrapped up a student case competition. We may be starting up Salesforce for Youth again soon, and I'm hoping, Moyez, that you and I can put our heads together and see if the UNT Dallas program that I worked with, the CRED program, sorry, I could not find the name, which did mock interviews for students across the campus and brought together some volunteers to do interviews and give students their first chance at a realish job interview. And I think it did a lot for a lot of the students that don't come from backgrounds that match where they're trying to get to. So it's exciting to be part of that and help. So please reach out with any opportunities like that where we can bring our user group resources to bear, or any ideas on content. This is my favorite slide. I usually try and rope everybody into tweeting for us. I did a little bit in a rush today, but if you wouldn't mind scanning with your phone and hopping into our Twitter fun. I've got listed the names of and the Twitter handles of the people in the group that are active on Twitter fairly regularly. So fairly good to follow and grab for information. Thank you, everybody, for that. It's just fun for me to try and wrap those up and put that out there and trick people into, hey, Sunil, into tweeting some stuff. So now I'll give you time to scan the code with your phone and tweet. I twist arms. I'm not ashamed. All right, we'll get it later. So we try to run the group with a concept of stack champions. If anybody wants to get involved and help bring hot topics or content to the user group, please reach out to me. These are the topics that we either have people in place for. Waqas Nasir, who is the CEO of a code scanning company, usually comes and gives us information on security topics and code topics. We've lost our flow expert, and in platform dev, we had Steve Mollis a couple weeks ago, but I'm still looking for somebody to bring that kind of pseudocode and admin helper functions. Integrations, our LWC expert is Nathan Schulman. Nana Gregg's been missing for a little while, but she's usually our new features and functions. And Moyez, a little bit of everything, and helps and takes care of all of our nonprofit stand-up. So we've got a Moyez slide in the deck later in the future, and I'll ask for mini Moyez updates. Only news I have for this month is Dreamforce check. Anybody know if they're going for Dreamforce? I know it's time to start registering. I got notifications the other day. You're going, Moyez? And Marlene's going? All right. It's cool to see people raise hands, but unfortunately the people in the crowd can't see that. I'll figure out how to do that. Now, I was going to bring a projector so that I could have both of these screens on the wall at the same time, but don't quite have it there. So it only looks like 2 or 3 people planning to go to Dreamforce. I've deprioritized it for this year. I don't think I'm going to go. Last year was interesting, the first year back, but next. That QR code is a link to the Trailblazer community group's calendar view. It is my favorite link to share because I don't usually plan to go to a group. I have an hour here and there to study. And when I do, I can go to that link and see what meetings and what topics are going on right now. So it's a time-based view of topics as opposed to a group-based view of topics. And most of the time you can see in the titles what the topics are, but sometimes it's a little harder. But I show this is my favorite bookmark to give everybody every single month without fail. I do have a new session coming up with Adam Olshansky. He and I are partnering to deliver a video series trying to help people get started from zero, learning to code in Salesforce. You don't need a degree in computer science for Salesforce development, but there are bits and pieces of senior coding concepts that'll help you. And Adam and I try and just have a fireside chat and talk through each of those, hoping to build a kind of a quick onboarding guide for people to get started in dev. It'll be good for experienced developers to learn some Salesforce concepts, but it's also good for cherry picking, going through C topics, but knowing you can skip pointers, garbage collection, and all that kind of stuff that we had to waste our times before we got into the Salesforce world. I was hoping Waqas was gonna.
Paul, you still there? We can't hear you. Can anybody else hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Frozen. I think we lost Paul.
Yeah. Okay. I'll ping him and see if maybe we can get him back.
Can you hear me? Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
You're back.
Yeah, that was weird. I got the hourglass icon on my laptop and everything kind of paused. And all right, hopefully I'm back and you can hear me. All right, so yeah, I don't know if you heard, Jade Leong will be helping with our military opportunities. in the future as well. So, but she wasn't able to make it. She had a business meeting at the last minute. Jade is great people. I get to hang out with her pretty regularly virtually, but she's out of Boston, an organizer and military booster extraordinaire. All right, so time for the Moyes Minute. Moyes, what do you got for us?
Well, the most exciting thing that's happening in my life, Salesforce-wise, is I think our ramp up to Dreamforce. I'm very much looking forward to going to Dreamforce this year. I hear that it's going to be scaled back significantly. Trailhead DX was quite a bit smaller than it usually is, which was kind of nice. The throngs were missing. But this year, I think they just recently closed the call for papers for the admin section. I haven't seen a call for papers yet for developers. I don't know if you've heard a call for papers for the devs. But I will tell you that hotels are cheaper and it should be a much more pleasant experience. If you've never done the Dreamforce experience, I do highly recommend it. Tickets are on sale right now at what they claim is 50% off. And so it's well worth picking up a ticket right now. That's kind of what I'm looking forward to in the Salesforce ecosystem. And I hope to see all of you there.
Yeah, a lot of fun, a lot of walking.
Yes. But this year, I think with the fewer attendees, I think it's all going to be in Moscone. So like in the past, we've kind of been all over the place, but I think this year it's going to be strictly in Moscone.
Yeah, I heard it's going to be 40,000 attendees, which is considerably smaller.
That's nice, isn't it? Yeah. Marketing at Salesforce kind of slapped Mark Benioff's hand because he said, oh, we're back in person and we're going to have 150,000 people. And, he started saying all these things and somebody in marketing raised their hand and said, sir, no, it's not 100. We've only got, I think he said, or marketing said 30,000 tickets, but yeah, they may have some free tickets as well. Wouldn't that be nice, right?
It was interesting. I'll tell you, from going to that I don't know if you've been to conferences since COVID. I had a hard, so I was at Dreamforce when it was just the 6,000 of us, I think. And first thing, trying to recognize people based on the color and shape of their head was terrible and got me into all sorts of uncomfortable. Oh, hey, David. Oh, yeah, you're not David. Find a way to put your name on your mask. At least
there you go.
I kept waiting for somebody to invent picture masks where you could order a mask that had a picture of your face on it. But yeah, I couldn't recognize anybody. And when I thought I recognized somebody, I got into a weird social situation. So that was less than fun. And I realized my hearing is also heavily based on being able to read people's lips, and that was hard. At Dreamforce, they had Color, the company Color, doing all of the COVID tests, and they would have you do a COVID test every morning and then walk. And they were very strict on looking through everybody's bags. I had a selfie stick tripod that they made me walk back to the hotel to put away. It was this long, but it was I mean, it didn't. If I put googly eyes on it, they wouldn't have noticed it because they didn't know what it was, and I had to show them what it was. It was a stick or a bat, and I ended up having to walk it back home, and that was a long morning in the heat. So beware of the things that are changing as you're going. Cool.
Trailhead DX was quite a bit more relaxed. Masks were optional. And I think it's basically, they said if you're vaccinated, you can go unmasked. I don't know if that's going to change, but certainly it was much, much more relaxed than I think the conference you went to. way back when.
Yep, thanks for helping on the chat, Vanilla. I appreciate that, getting that link out there. It's hard for me to run the show and troubleshoot Zoom at the same time, so thank you very much for the chat help. Okay, well, let's see. Let me hop back to the slide. Zoom won't let me do that. Go here. Next month, a friend and coworker on the CTA path, Angel Figueroa, is scheduled to talk to us about CTA journey. There have been a handful of changes to it. A lot more people are going through it. It is a lot less nebulous. So the path is easier to understand. It's becoming a very popular certification track. Companies are hiring for it very aggressively. So looking forward to hearing from Angel next month. And then I, as mentioned in the beginning, I may try and get us a CDC and high volume platform events session as well coming up. It's excited. I met somebody who can talk, and I think that not heavily dev, but highly architecture, and probably going to be highly relevant in the next few months, so, or next phases of Salesforce evolution. All right, main session. So I've been a fan of this man ever since I started trying to learn Salesforce. When you Google how to do something in Salesforce, ApexHours shows up. If you haven't studied something from him, you haven't tried very hard. Amit, thank you very much for showing up. I'm glad I jumped through all the hoops to find a time in your calendar that you could show up. Thank you for making it work on our day. You should have rights to take over presenting, and I would love for you to tell everybody about everything that you do as a, make you brag about yourself, because everybody should know who you are.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me. So let me, can I share my screen now?
Yeah, you should be able to.
Can you confirm you are able to see my screen?
Yep, I can see your screen.
And I hope you are able to see my presentation or the presentation mode, another one, right? Okay. Hey everyone, good evening and good morning. I know someone joined from another country, the morning for them. So good morning and good evening, everyone, based on your time, John. So my name is Amit Chaudhary. Few of might know me about you from ApexHours. So I'm the owner of it and founder of it and running it from the long time. And apart from that, like I'm a Salesforce MVP and the Salesforce technical architect. So currently working on a big project and handling enterprise level. And today I'm going to talk about the code review in Salesforce and how you can make some checklists and set a standard for your developers so that make sure they are handling it properly and taking care of it, and how we can do it. That's what we'll talk about in this session. So I want this session to be little interactive. If you have any question, feel free to put into the chat window. So I will be keep my eyes on chat window on another screen. So feel free to post the question, or if you have any comment or anything, I will try my best to pick the question in between. So let's get started. And so today's agenda is like what is code review and why we need to do the code review, basic code review, how to set the standard, and we'll talk about how the expert do the code review, and we'll talk about some code review best practice, code quality, and we'll talk about a couple of example how we can improve the code. So that was the agenda for today. So let's get started. What do you think? What is the code review in general? Anyone want to unmute yourself and want to talk about it? Okay, so let me start. So if you're thinking the code review is this, one developer is writing the code and everyone is watching
We
this.
do it in our pull request.
This is not exactly the code review. So code review is the software quality insurance process, which actually manually by the team or by any automation tool. And why we need it? The motive is behind to find the bug early before the code go into production, and you'll find it later stage. And it's basically used to make sure the new feature developed within the company high quality standard. And to make sure the essential process and software quality, everything is handled as per your company best practices and code review process. So let's see why we need a code review. So why we need a code review? Majority of the company actually deal with the code which is written in your org, but it is not consistent. So what's happened? There are plenties of trigger frameworks are available in market. All of them are good. I am not saying this is bad or this is good. Everything is good, but sometime what happens, somebody followed handler pattern, somebody follow dispatcher pattern, somebody follow a different pattern on a different trigger. And the end, when you're doing and maintaining the code, it's really hard and horrible to maintain the code. So it is really recommended to do the code best practices and follow it, so that if you doing the code review, you can say that, hey, this is what the trigger framework we are using, or this is what the best practices we are doing, and this is what the so it actually help you to make set the best practices and the consistency. And it's also help you to reduce the tech debt. So like 80 to 40 or 40 to 80% company used to spend their most of the development time to maintain the software, and it actually just because of the tech debt. So if you are doing the code review, maintaining the code properly, that actually help you to reduce the tech debt. And also it will be help you to reduce the buzz factor. So let me tell you what the buzz factor means. So there might be possibility today one senior developer is working in a team, or the architect is working on a team, and he have a full grip on a particular module. And then there might be possibility he's sick, or he want to take on leave, or want to left the company. In that particular scenario, you don't have a you have a heavily dependency on that particular developer, architect, or lead, or admin. So in that particular scenario, you don't have a backup, and you always go with the KT and all this thing. But if you have a code reviewer process set up, then definitely if I'm building something, then Paul is my code reviewer. He also know what Amit is working and what the functionality. He will always have a grip on that topic. If some developer like Amit is not available, the Paul can take over if it and handle it in absence of Amit. So that is actually help you to reduce the buzz factor. And it's also allow the discussion. So there might be possibility Amit thought he's a good in Apex, and he thought he can write a code, but Paul thought like hey, why Amit you're writing the code? There might be possibility I write the code as per everything best practice standard and everything is good, but that can be easily achievable by out of the box functionality or the flow. So that actually give a very good discussion point where the developer, senior developer, architect, admin can talk together and discuss what is the best way to implement it, and they can discuss about the alternative solutions. And it actually help you to improve the maintainability. And definitely in that, if you are doing the code review, then it's actually help you to create it, help you to not write the repeatable code. You can create the utility classes which is actually being used in the multiple places, so that will be help you. And last and not least, educate other on the new code. So when you're writing the code, actually that will be help a junior developer or another developer to, if they are reading the code, then it will be understand what is the different way of writing the same thing in the different way. So new developer actually can look into the code, and they can learn from the senior guys and learn about how to write a good quality of code. And on the other hand, like if the experienced people is doing, they can explain the standard and best practices to the team. So it's actually help the both the people, senior and junior, so that they can learn from each other. So it's a good process to have in a team. Now, if I'm talking about what come in your mind, if I'm talking about basic code review, anyone want to unmute yourself and talk like what the meaning of code review? When I'm talking about code review, what come in your mind? If you are thinking about only this point or anything else in your mind, feel free to unmute or put it into the chat window.
Readability, and good variables. Good.
Nice. Any other topic come into your mind when you are doing the code review?
And I've also started to become a big fan of PMD.
Anything else?
Code coverage.
So if you see like whatever the topic I included, the majority of time when you're doing the code review, we only think about very common thing. Like I'm unable to understand the code. Well, that is the very first thing people look into the code. If you are able to understand, the code is good. If you're not able to understand, code is bad. That is not actually a expert code review. That's what I say. It's a basic code review. And people think, hey, code is too big. That is a normal thing. Like they say, hey, 40 lines of code is a code big. SQL inside the for loop, code coverage, code formatting, naming conventions, following the standard guidelines, and there is any duplicate code. That is a basic thing. Every people look into the code and find it out. But do you really think this is the only thing we should look into when we are doing the code review? Okay. So do you think like this is the only thing we should consider while doing the code review?
No, also how scalable it is. Does it handle large data volumes?
Good point. Any other point you want to bring?
I would say reusability. How much of a code is written to be able to reuse for the down the road.
Very good point. Any other one? Any other point you think? Okay. So before doing the code review, it doesn't mean like, okay, we just directly jump into the code review and do the same thing again and again and again. And that actually to waste lots of time. It's process, but it can waste lots of time if you are doing the repetitive work. So before doing the code review and before starting your things, it's the good point is create the checklist. So that checklist can be shared with your developers and the architect and everyone, so that they know what the expectation I have when I'm doing the code review. So that developer will not at least repeat those things. So first thing, set the goal and the standard. So if you have an architect in place, it's architect responsibility to set the standard goals and everything, best practices, what you are looking for. The second thing is the communicate the goal and expectation very well within the team and set the process and what need to be done, and use the code review checklist so that at least you don't need to spend the time on the same thing again and again, right? So, like if you think like your team is spending huge time on doing the same mistake again, you can write it down like naming conventions, flow framework, trigger framework. If you have anything, document it properly. If you have a my trailhead, create it over there and give that training to your developer before on the first day of the joining. They understand what is your company standard, what is your company naming conventions, what is your best practices. So something like when I'm talking about conventions, best practices, it's not about on platform and conventions. It can be different for each company. So there might be possibility one company wants something different naming convention or styling and another one different. So you need to educate your developer so that they will not repeat the same mistake. And on the day of the first day, they can read out that checklist and review it and what they're expecting. That you can create either if you have a my trailer, you can leverage that, or if you have any other platform like Quip or Confluence, you can document so that on the day of onboarding, the developer will look into that. And the very thing is, before jumping into the checklist part, next part, just want to set the expectation to the developer. It doesn't mean otherwise the developer will come up, they developed it, and they will raise the pull request one day before that release date. In that particular scenario, what will be happen? Your tech lead will have a pressure to approve the ticket. Otherwise, they'll say, hey, today is the last date. Can you approve it? And if you write some big comment and he need to rewrite the whole big whole code or some 20-30% of the code, it might be too late for them. And in that particular scenario, product owner, RT, everyone will come, hey, can you approve this code? We will fix it later. In that particular way, your backlog will be keep increasing and you are increasing your tech debts. So it will not resolve the issue. And the next time the developer have new ticket, he will not focus on your ticket. And what you are doing, it will be keep increasing in your technical debts and all this thing. But in that particular way, if you have a very good communication in place, you can say that, hey, when you are writing your estimating your user story, estimate it with the best practices and make sure there might be possibility you need to rewrite the code as per the standards. In that particular way, you can set up a process. Okay, don't commit the code into the last day of the sprint. Commit it before 1 and 2 days ahead of the time so that you can do the code review. And if any back and forth is needed, they can fix the code and the code review will be happen again and they can fix it and deploy it. So make sure expectation is set properly with the developer. Otherwise, you will be faced different kind of challenges. And definitely, I will be highly recommended, don't do what the tool can do. So very good point the poll raised, like spending more time, more than 60 minutes for one pull request, you are wasting your time. Leverage the tool, and tool will be actually can find it out the basic stuff which you are looking for. If I talk about the last slide, whatever the point I included, majority of them like that Apex PMD or like static code analysis can do for you. So I will say highly recommended you to do that. And once you have the standard set, now it's time for thinking about the expert level code review. So when I'm talking about expert level code review, lots of things come into my mind. So I'm talking about so first of all, it's not about like when you're doing the code review, you will close your eyes and start reading the code and say, hey, this is wrong, this is right. No, this is exactly wrong. So first of all, if you're writing it, you should understand the non-functional requirement. And when you are reviewing the code, make sure like being tech lead or a developer who is doing, you understand the business requirement very well. And you read the Jira ticket or whatever the ALM tool you're looking into that, and make sure you have a full understanding of that particular module, and then jump into this. And make sure when you're doing it, you have the make sure the code is following the non-functional requirement. So sometimes developer come, they only implemented whatever written into acceptance criteria. They don't think about large data volume. They don't think about security. They simply missed it out. So that is the main thing. You need to developer, your code should be meet the functional requirement as well as the non-functional requirement, so that over the time, whenever you will have the I just heard initially somebody was talking like in my org, I have 5 million of data and my none of the query is working. That is the reason, right? If the code review is not in place, that kind of issue will be happen. So if you're reviewing the code and you make sure your queries are selective and you are adding the filter properly, adding the limit properly, and adding that best practices for SQL, that kind of issue will be never come into the future. So that actually save your time. And definitely, and you are also taking care, defined architecture is meet into that code or not. So defined architecture can be different, like your team is following the trigger framework, enterprise Apex pattern. It can be selector pattern, service pattern. It's depend on your project. I'm not saying like every project need to follow this. It's depend on the complexity and the timing and lots of other funding part of your project. So accordingly, whatever the framework your architecture defined, make sure that should be consistent and followed by everyone. And when it's come to the best practice, definitely everyone need to follow that. And this is plenty of blogs, and it's already documented into the Salesforce documentation. You need to make sure you are following the governor limit, cross-site scripting, SQL injection. So make sure you are taking care of all these things. I did not list it down all the best practices. Pretty much everyone know about it. So that's why I include only a couple of complex one. And then you're writing the code. Make sure your developer is actually using the object-oriented analysis principles. So sometimes they forget about it and just write a code. So making sure like your code should follow the solid principle, dependency injection, suppress of concern, dry principle, open close principle, and single response principle. So make sure like if you have a good design pattern in place, that will be always help you to maintain your code into the future. And definitely, last and not least, I will be say use the static code analysis, and so that at least that can what the tool can save. You don't need to give those time to the human. Save your time. So anybody have any question on this slide before jumping ahead? I hope like looking forward.
Have a favorite static code analysis tool?
My favorite.
Yes.
So definitely Apex PMD is one of them. CodeScan is I also use in past, and SonarQube is also one of the best one. So it's depend which one you want to use. Currently, like Apex PMD, I'm regularly using. CodeScan, I'm currently using. So it's depend because the budgeting is also involved, right? And you can use the check marks as well. So there are a couple of them.
Okay, yeah, we're friends with and usually have Digitsec, which is a static code analysis tool. So it's another one. And I question, so when we enabled PMD via Capado, Capado let us just turn on some filtering for certain code best practices, and you couldn't get around it. Too many lines in a method, too many methods in a class. Class is too long. It basically could block promotion. Do you think it's a good idea to scale those forward, or set those dependencies and make everybody work through them, or start easy and tighten it down?
So definitely it's depend, like when I start a presentation, I say like it's all about your company, right? So your company decide your best practices. So if you think like what the Copado rule you're talking about, it's the secure quality gates you're talking about. So I will be saying you can modify it if you want, and that is good to have thing and must to have thing. And if I'm not wrong, the Copado also use the Apex PMD in the background, and they also have a very good connectivity with the code scan tool as well. So it's up to you and budgeting point what you want to implement. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
So let me jump into the next part. So while doing the code review best practices, so let me start. So first of all, like what the code is doing. So you should have, before doing the code review, you should have a very good understanding, like the right background, and understand the user story acceptance criteria and everything. Before doing the code review, you should know what is in the code. And the another thing is inspect. And definitely once you know what the developer is trying to do, you need to make sure naming convention is followed, dry principle is followed, error handling is there, and code is in a similar fashion, which your company is writing, your other developers are writing. And then next one is the frame your mind. You should have like a good understanding of the code base and the language when you are doing the code review, and going to the and make sure this, are you going to use this code into the feature? If you are planning to use it, then make sure like you are utilizing it, making util classes and separation concern which can be used into the future. And expectation levels of other also need to be expected. Like when you're doing the code review, don't expect too much thing from the fresher. There might be some time you need to teach them. And the best part and the least part is the feedback. When you're writing the code comment, don't be a dictator. Like frame your comment into the respect. Don't command them, don't like comment them. Try to make it into respectful way. Don't say, hey, what the hell you are doing, this is this and this. I will say, like when you are writing the comment, be a respectful. Ask them, request them to do the changes, and give, if possible, give the example into the comment. Hey, can you write like this? Can you use this class? So that actually make a good, healthy environment, working environment within a team. So the other developer who is actually reviewing your code, they will not feel offended. Hey, Amit gave me like 20 comment on your ticket, and he gave only 2 comment on my ticket. They don't feel bad why I'm getting too much code review comment and all. So you should make a healthy environment so that they will always expecting you to write more comment in your ticket, so that they can learn from you and your experience. So make it respectful and be open for discussion. There might be possibility, if I'm doing the code review, I write something and I might be wrong. The someone else have more knowledge, or someone knew something which I don't know. So be open and be ready for the changes, and don't be authoritative, like to make sure they are doing the same thing what you want to do it. So feedback is very much important, and keep it politely and respectful. So code quality tips and tips for the code quality. Let's see what we can do. And the topic is very big. If you want to do it, like it can take a whole day. But I will take a small example of the code, and we'll talk about how we can do the code review. So this is one of the code. Unfortunately, I know it's really hard to see by everyone. But if you can, I will love to ask if you can find some issue in this code. I know it's text is too small. Unfortunately, the code is big and it's really hard to put it over here. But if somebody can identify, it will be really great. Otherwise, I will jump into the next slide and will try to highlight the issue from this code. Okay, I know it's really query in the loop. Good call. Okay. Perfect. Query in a loop. Anything else? Without sharing. Mhm. Okay, so let me jump. So first of all, this code is very big. You definitely find it out doing the query inside the for loop. And then there's lots of issue. What we are doing, if you think there were three functionality which I was doing into the single code, and the code was really bad and really hard to understand. If you think like it cannot fit on the one screen, it's not readable, and that is itself is a big problem. So what you can do if you want to do multiple thing, you can actually split the method into a different method and you can do it. But in short, the function should do one thing. They should do it well, and they should do it only. That is a thumb rule you should follow when you're writing the method. So, but still, I will be, it doesn't mean if I refactor the old code in such a way, it's really good one and it's really perfect code. Somebody want to highlight some more mistake, which I did it after the code review. So there might be possibility. That's what I say, always open for discussion. So there was a code, I rewrite this and ask the developer write in such a way. But there might be possibility I am introducing something, some more issue. Somebody want to look into this code and find it out. So if you see in the before handling method update, this is the main method I'm calling. From this, I created three methods and calling the same thing. But if you notice it, I'm iterating the same for loop 3 times. If you see this for loop, for sale, new sales, for sale, new sales, and all. So I'm iterating this one. And over the time, if I will keep adding the method in the same way, what will be happen? It will be increase the CPU time limit. So it doesn't mean you are doing the code review, you are the perfect person. Be open for the discussion, be open for other to give the feedback so that you can learn from someone else as well. So that is why I intentionally added this issue. And if you think of trade-off and single for loop for the multiple for loop. So we can rewrite that method in a different way. Now, if you think I rewrite the for loop and then from the inside the for loop, I'm calling the different method and I'm repeating all this, whatever I need to rewrite divided into the code. So if you want to learn like if you heard about the one of the person, Uncle Bob, so look into his presentation. He's really such a great guy and he have a really good presentation on and he write the book called Clean Code. So his principle is your method should be not more than 5 lines. So I will say go and read if you want to learn more about the writing the clean code. And yep, this is one of the example like I intentionally added for the loop issue so that you understand when you're doing the code review, you need to respect other as well. There is always a different way to write. Yep, the good point Paul also had like safe navigation operator I can use. Definitely if there are different way to write it, right? So be open for the discussion. It doesn't mean what you are thinking that is the only right way. So yep. And the next thing is don't repeat yourself. That is most important part when you're writing the code. Don't like if you need to do some kind of iteration and repetition, it doesn't mean like you need to do on the same thing on the before insert and after insert update. So don't repeat it. Try to make a separate method and try to utilize the same into the different way. So I can say you can create the service classes and that service classes you can call from your handler methods. And definitely when I'm talking about the naming conventions and all that need to be set up for your code. So that was the one example I added. There must be plenty of example I can add. And this is a topic like to be verifying. I can talk whole night, but I don't want I be respectful with your time. And we'll go through all the best practices from the high level so that if you have any question and doubt, I will love to talk about that as a new session into the future. But here we'll talk about how you can create some naming convention, best practices and everything. So definitely, first of all, the naming convention should be very well documented for you. So for your developers, my bad. so that they understand while doing the code review, writing the code, they understand what the expectation your organization have. So document it, like what is the most of the people can get confused, like when you're writing, hey, can you use the camel case, kebab case, Pascal case, snack case. So document it properly, what's the snack case is, what Pascal case, and what's kebab case, and document it with the example, so that when your developer is looking into that, they can understand it very well. And then definitely when you're defining the naming convention, the most important part, like you are using the prefix and postfix in the class, so that you can easily understand, okay, what it is and how to use it. And top of it, like give example, like how the class name should be started, like start with the capital letter, variable should be start with the lower letter, and the method name should be start with the lower letter, and the constant should be all capital separated by underscore. And trigger, how it should be have name should be start, like start with the object name and then use the postfix and prefix for it, so that it can understandable. So I will say highly recommended use your postfix and prefix. It depend on your company project and all other things, so that standard can be set up by your architect. I just use a small example, like I'm something, if I'm writing on a user, I use the user as a as object name, and then appended and the postfix as like trigger, so that you can easily understand what that means. If I'm writing trigger handler, just add trigger handler, and if you're writing extension, just type ext, and if you're writing rest, just type rest, and if you're writing batch, add the postfix. So if you can define it by the name itself, you can understand what the class, what is written into this class, or what's the type of this class, so that you don't need to spend too much time right searching the class. By the name itself, you should understand what the functionality is written into this, so that if some developer into the future need to find it out, he will not, if we are writing the batch and if a name is something fancy and all this thing, it's really hard. But if you simply add the postfix as a patch, I can simply, oh, I need to go on the user object, I will go on user object, will search with the U, and then figure it out what class have the postfix as a batch. So easily can understand, okay, this all of the batch classes I have on the user object. And so this is the easiest way, but feel free to modify it, update it as per your company pattern, standard, and everything. This is something like I love it and I like it. And then definitely define your code layout, formatting, and into the Salesforce. So definitely, I will be highly recommended. Ask your developer to write the code comment and code comment on that class. And some people have different opinion on the code comment. They say, "Hey, I'm already using that version control system. Why should I do it?" Right? So because version control already maintained who developed, who modified it, and what modified it, definitely you can do it. But in short, when you need to do it, it's really hard to understand what the functionality that method and class is doing. I know you don't need author detail, you don't need a date, but you definitely need a description. And in future, if you want to use Apex doc, and if you have those documented properly, you can anytime leverage this. And I know very less people use Apex doc, but it's good to have thing if you document it properly. Anytime, whenever you need it, you can simply configure Apex doc and you can use it. So I will highly recommend it. Go define your commenting structure, like how it should be on method and how it should be on class level. And this decorate @ author description parameter is very important if when you are using Apex doc, because that going to be read only this, and based on that only your Apex doc will be generated. So make sure about it and document it properly for your developers, so that they will follow into the same standard. Okay, so let's jump into the layout and the formatting. Before jumping here, I am the only one person who is keep talking. And if you have any point and anything you want me to repeat, I will love to repeat it or go back on this part again. Any question like
Hey, so mostly so you can get a drink if you need to, but I've kind of leaned into or am trying to figure out a pattern around functional prefixes. I kind of hate that Apex files don't have a folder structure or a namespace that you can associate them with. So I hate when people try and name them by project, but by function is where I usually try and come up, hey, we're doing these 85 functions, name your classes along those lines. Do you have a recommendation for stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely. So I still remember when I started my career into the initial stage. So in the one project, there was 3 different projects were there, and everyone starting adding their own project name in initially. So that is actually not a good way to do it. And definitely nowadays, like I will be say, like if you are replacing it with a name, like definitely first of all, you should define the standard, like what the postfix and prefix should be there. And top of it, you can use the namespace as well. And I will be say your code should, if you are planning to use second generation package unlock packaging, then you have a very good thing, like you can use the namespace, put everything segregated with the DX, and in that you can put it a different folder structure for each project. So that actually help you to do that. But it's actually totally different topic. I will be love to talk about that in some other day. But I guess we have a very good documentation already available on unlock packaging. And I don't so if you want, I have a very good course on it. I love to share with anyone who would love to look into that. Reach out to me. I will be give you free code so you can watch it.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's jump into here layout and formatting. So layout and formatting should be defined very well. Some people like tab when doing the indentation. Some people don't say, hey, tab is too much space, just use a double space. So it's defined, and I will be highly recommended that kind of thing should be documented very well, and put it on your VS Code and align it and share the same setting with all the developers so that they will be automatically do it. I don't want your developer will be spending so much time to beautify the code. There are lots of extensions are available into the market, beautifier and all these things. I highly recommended go and use it, and definitely write it your code. Like if you are writing the code, indentation should be like this. Okay, you should use the bracket, and then you should use the bracket like this and closing like this. Some people write opening and closing in the same line. Some people, I personally like in the this way, but it's different. I say like it's all about your company, how you want to do it. So it's not about who is talking. So you can define it. And then if you're writing the code like this, can you see how bad it look like? I'm writing 1 equal 0, and then there is no space between. This can be easily added with the spaces and white spaces, and it look good and easily readable. So make sure you're doing that principle. And line length, make sure your one line should not contain more than 80 character, or I will say you should not use the scroll bar to read the full line. So it should be covered within a page. That is a best practice to do it. So if you're all the code is coming in one page, that is a good way. Try to wrap up your line like this with the example I give. And when you wrap up, make sure you wrap up with the don't break it between the parentheses. Try to cover after that, or use like this. So make sure like avoid this parenthesis part. If you see this parenthesis I included, so try to don't break it from the parenthesis. Try to break it before it, so that it will be easy understandable. Like when you're doing that Bodmas rule is properly written, and you can understand, okay, this is the one calculation, this is another calculation, easy to understandable. This is one of the good example I give how you can do it, the bad wrapping and good wrapping. So it's up to you. You can define. And then definitely when writing the code, set up the guideline when the braces should be open and closed. And definitely if the code is written for SQL, then SQL should be written in a proper way. Okay, select clauses will be there, then the field you want to select. So when I read the query, I don't need to find it out, hey, where is the from which object I'm finding the data and which filter I'm using. So make it easy and simple so that you can understand in a one way, one go, and understand. If you see this query, I can easily look into this. Okay, this is coming from account, and what is the filter I have, and what is the limitation I have. And make a set up a rule like, okay, when the developer should use, it doesn't mean I'm saying use the proper space and everything. They keep adding the enters and lots of spaces. So make sure they should not use lots of white spaces, and you should specify when they should use the single break of line and when we should have 2 line of break. So lots of good articles are available on my website. If you search it with the same topic, you will find it with example. So you can search it on Google, figure it out. And I will be love to hear your feedback. If you think there is something which need to be added, I am compiling lots of things from my end from the long time, but looking forward for your feedback and comment so that I can enhance it. And definitely Apex best practice. So very first practice, don't write the Apex code. That's the very first practice. Try to use out of the box Salesforce standard features and use flow and automation tool to do your automations. If you need to do it, definitely follow the best practices. The pretty much everyone in in this session, I guess, pretty much aware about what the best practices we have. Bulkify Apex code, avoid SQL, DML, use query last data set, use the map. Pretty much most of them, I'm pretty much sure everyone is aware about it. And if you want me to talk about this, it will be take a whole session itself. It can be one session. If you love to talk, listen about all of this, I will love to come into this group again and talk about each of them with the example, or you can just watch a recent session from the Mohit Srivastava. He just recently had a session like best practices into Apex in 2020. So it's really great session. You can watch the recording into ApexHours YouTube channel or on the Salesforce Developer YouTube channel. So that is really great session. I will say recommended everyone to watch it. So next, let's move to the next topic that's called SQL best practices. It's a small topic. I will love to talk about this into detail for each of the topics. So make sure when you're writing the query, then you're focusing on the building effective and selective query. So make sure when you're doing it, you are using the query with the index field. And pretty much here is the list of all the index field, which is out by default. And if you think you are using some custom field which is not index, and for that you can raise a request in the Salesforce, and so that they can make indexing on it, and you can use that into the filter. So whatever the initial point before starting the session, we are talking about millions of record and the query is not working, you're not able to query it just because of this kind of issue. And if you are taking care of that in advance, that kind of issue will not come into the future. So how you should write the query? So let me take into the little more in detail. So there is a example of non-selective query. So don't try to write a filter on the null. So if you see, I'm writing, okay, select where custom field equal to null. And don't try to write a query on the negative filter like does not equal to close. Think about it. If you have a status, have a 5 different status, if you're writing does not equal to close, it means you are scanning the whole table. But if you write the equal to close, then you are only picking the one folder, one thing, and you are using equal to close or the equal to this. In that particular, go for the particular so that you don't need to scan the whole table. And so that's what I will recommend it. So instead of using does not equal to close, I will highly recommend it. Go and say status equal in open progress, whatever you want to use. And try to avoid using the wildcard. If you go with the wildcard, it actually scan whole table. So try to avoid it as much as you can. And definitely try to avoid your comparison operator like equal to 10. So it's actually scan the whole table. So make sure when you are writing your query should not scan whole table. If your query will be scan whole table and you have a more than 100,000 record, it will be stop working. Like 50,000, you will have issue and getting the data, and use the proper limitation and everything. So there are lots of other best practices you can use, like avoiding query on the formula field. Don't use the query formula field into the where clause to avoid the indexing issue and the non-index selective query issue. And then the security is the major part of any project. So when your developer is writing the code, or you are deciding and putting the best practice in place, try to make sure your developer is following the security pattern properly into your Apex code. And when we are talking about the security pattern, the very first thing comes versus user mode versus system mode. And you know, by default, Salesforce run majority of thing into the system mode. And if you want to do it with the user mode, then there is a couple of things like user mode, like by default, standard UI work into the user mode, API run into the user mode, execution anonymous work into the user mode, standard control work into user mode. And when I'm talking about user mode, it's mean your code field level security and sharing enforced. But if I'm talking about system mode, in that your CRUD field level security are not enforced. Apex class does not work by default into the system mode. Trigger does not work by default into the system mode. Web services does not work into the by default into sorry, my bad. They actually Apex class system, Apex and trigger and all this work actually into the system mode. My bad, I use the wrong word. So yeah, so in this work into system mode, it's mean they are not enforcing any field level security and everything on trigger and all. If you want to do it, I will say create a Apex class and use the handler pattern, and then use the with sharing. So that's in sharing and everything will be enforced into the user context if you want to do it. So take care about user mode and the system mode and use it properly. And if you want to enforce, if you add with sharing and without sharing, it doesn't mean that you are enforcing the object level permission and field level security. It will be only work on your records, not on your query, but not on DML. If you want to do it, there's the other way around. Use the schema method. If you are doing the schema method, work on SQL and the DML, and you can use the with security enforce keyword that actually work on SQL but not work on DML. And you can use the strip inexability, so that is actually work on SQL and as well as on DML. But the new part is I love this feature, that is operation in the user mode, that is actually not in pilot now, it is in beta now. So it's work on both the places. So it's really good. You just need to mention after your query or while you're doing the DML, just say insert as user mode and then specify your list of operation. It will be work into the user mode. So that is easy and quite. Otherwise, previously, if you see like most of the developer use schema method, in that you will write system dot is creatable, is accessible. So lots of, for the small thing, if you are doing 20 fields, you are writing, they're writing the field 20 field filters that actually make the code very big. So you can avoid this using the user mode. So if you have any question about user mode, I will love to talk about that in detail. But yep, this is the 4 different way you have to enforce the field level security and object level security into Salesforce. And when you're writing the code, make sure you are enforcing the application security. Application security is very much important. Like make sure when you're writing, nobody's using the SQL injection in your code and cross-site scripting. So there are different ways to resolve it. I will be highly recommended. Look into that and make sure your code is taking care about this. And the next part is definitely cross-site scripting. So make sure like no malicious code will be enter your in your application and hack your application. So I will say keep all this thing in your mind, documented the best practices and everything for your team, so that they will take care and your code will be secure and written as per the best practices. And if you talk about the my way, if I'm writing the code, so my way, if you will ask me, so first of all, I will not write the code. The best way is try to use the automation tool and get it resolved by this. But if you need to do some automation which cannot be done by out of the box, then definitely you need to go with the Apex. For that, I will be recommended you before writing the code, think before writing the code and see you can achieve what is the best way to achieve it and how you can do it, or there is any already existing service classes which can use, or code is written already there or not. So look into that before writing into this, and then write the code. And after your code is ready, get it work. And once it work, it doesn't mean your job is done. You need to refactor it and make it clean. So sometime when you're writing the code, your focus is only make it work, right? It doesn't mean you're done. So make it, refactor it, fix it accordingly and make it clean, and then commit the code for the code review. So this is the best way to do it, or my recommended way to do it. And always follow the Boy Scout rule. Leave the campaign cleaner than you found it. Doesn't mean like if I'm writing on a trigger and I find, hey, this is the bad code, I'm only taking care about myself. If you can, you have a time, if you have a bandwidth, try to fix the existing, clean your existing code as well, so that it will be not dirty as it was before. So make it cleaner than you found it. So make sure about it, otherwise you will be keep finding that tech debts, and it will be keep bugging into the code. I will say, if you have a bandwidth, you don't have a tight deadline, fix it on the same sprint, or just raise a tech debt request to your scrum master. They can create it into the backlog and they can resolve it in the future. And so one thing I will say, Benjamin say that you are not done when it's work, you are done when it's clean. So It doesn't mean you are done once you are able to achieve your functional requirement. Actually, you are only done when your code is written in a cleaner fashion. So that's all from my end. Thank you so much, and I'm pretty much open for any question if you have.
Oh, I've got one for you. Just to start everybody off, and please feel free to unmute. If we have too many people, we'll figure out how to do a round robin. But what has been the hardest best practice for you to make yourself do?
What is the hardest make is best practice? Pass the message properly to the team so that they commit the code into the time. They will not come into the last minute of the sprint end date. So that is the best practice or the best standard I will say you need to set up.
Gotcha. Anyone else have any questions? Everybody here, we have to struggle for the microphone, but questions? No. My weakness is always refactoring. Once I finish writing the logic, I have trouble stopping and going back and trying to break things into more modular components. When it compiles, when the errors go away, I'm done. So I took a screenshot. I'm going to make that poster, make that a poster when it's clean.
Yep. And one more thing, when I'm like people do when they write the code, they try to modelize it and they try to make it complex that they can only understand the code, nobody else. So I will be say, don't do that. And if you're writing, make it follow the object-oriented principle called case, keep it simple. So that is a very much good way. So try to modelize the code, but keep it simple so that anyone will be come into the future, they can understand the code. Majority of the issue I found, like pretty much a big architect also facing that issue. They write the code and after 1 year they come, who actually did this code, and they were not able to understand their code written by themselves itself. So make the code simple so that if you need to refactor the same code after 1 year, you should able to understand and do it. So make it simple. So that is the biggest principle I will be highly recommended to everyone.
Do you have any tricks for summarizing what code does so that people can read the functionality without trying to parse the code?
Exactly. So for that, I say use the proper commenting. So if you remember, put the comment properly on top of the class and top of the method so that you can easily understand and you can easily understand what your code is doing.
What about for sharing with other people? If I don't want you to reinvent my wheel, how do I share with other developers what functionality I built and make it easy and quick to read without just saying, here's all my code?
So if you want it, right? So definitely, if you are writing the review, commenting properly, you can use the Apex doc, and Apex doc will be generated. In that, you don't need to share your code. You can share the Apex doc with them, and they can understand from that, okay, what's that code is doing.
Okay, I haven't used that before.
Yep.
Thank you. That's good stuff. Anyone else have any questions? Feel free to come off mute. Marlene, you're off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to share a couple of things from my org. So my org was implemented by a couple of large SIs. I won't name names, but it's been interesting for me to come into it 4 years after it's been built, right? We have one class that is a constants class. I want to say it's got about 700 lines in it. And we're going to work and refactor our code because we just created a class, right, where we added 3 constants to that class for 3 attributes that could easily be put into a custom setting, into a label, into custom metadata, other things, right? Because that class has gotten so big that anytime that we need to go debug code, just that class running alone adds so much to the debug logs, right? So I just wanted to share that, right? Object-oriented is good, but sometimes I joke that the person that built our org was a heavy Java developer, and they were used to Java coding versus Apex coding, which is very different. So they did not use a lot of the platform features that should have been used in the org. So I will help the team slowly go through the code and do it. The other thing I wanted to add, Amit, is you didn't cover here, but you kind of did, doing an audit before you start to code, right? Figuring out what's already there. Right now, like everybody else, we're doing flow migrations. And so I started the audit on one of our objects, and we have a before save method and trigger that does the same thing as an after save trigger. Does the same thing as workflow rules. And so we're touching the record 3 times to do the exact same update, right? So obviously we're going to take all that down and take it down to just one automation. But just wanted to share the audit in the beginning is really, really good, just to know what's been built before you go build it. I've also been asking the team to make sure that the approach that they take is you actually don't want your code to run. So how are you writing it? Yeah,
I included
absolutely.
that point here. So don't mix Apex or process builder workflow record trigger together. They are not good friend.
Absolutely. I have
Because
one
we are
process.
doing, yep.
I have one process builder that in 2 weeks ran 2 million times. It should have run 18 times, just to give you an example of that. Process builder is horrendous, right? We're obviously replacing it. But I tell my folks, you want your code to not run. So how are you making it so that it's very selective, that it's only running when it needs to and not running randomly? So just wanted to add to what you shared. It was a great presentation. Thank you for all the knowledge you've shared.
I have, on top of that, Marlene, I have an 80-20 rule. I'm a flownatic. I always try to write stuff in flows first, only flows, no process builders, no workflows. I'm purist. But if I can't write 80% of the functionality of a feature in flows, and I need more than 20% Apex, I write it all in Apex.
Mhm.
Having splitting your logic for a feature of within multiple development tools, I think is a horrible disservice to code maintenance.
And top of it, like I will pass one more comment over here. Like if you have a heavy logic lifting, I will be say leave it on Apex. Don't write it into flow, and leave the automation tool for notification and small configuration or after event. So because handling that is really difficult if you're not writing automation properly. The
Mhm.
flow is really good, and over the time it's getting mature. So previously there was some issue like you cannot set the order of execution. You need to create your framework one of same like trigger one framework at a time, and one flow per object per event. But the problem was there was a limitation of I forget the numbers of element you can add. But now good thing, like you can get the multiple, but there is a new enhancement come recently. You can set the order of execution over there.
Mhm.
So flow is getting mature every release, and every time like there is one explorer also come, you can drag and drop, it will be set the order of execution. But I will be highly recommended if you are doing the heavy lifting, go ahead with the Apex and major logic if you are doing. But because in the other automation tool there is some limitations, some issues are still there, and try to use one automation per object, either go with the Apex or the flow, but don't mix both of them together with a multiple way, so that you will not stuck into the recursions.
Man, I want to have a good chat with you on flow, Apex, and Salesforce functions. I'm leaning into do everything with flows, do some stuff with Apex, and your real heavy lifting should be in Salesforce functions, if you can afford it, if the license is there. There's only a couple of times that I don't feel like I can do something in a flow, heavy in-memory management. I found a way around the large number of records. Lookups, lock rows, I think is another thing that you just can't do with flows. You have to hop out to an Apex action. And I get caught having defending a stance that one trigger per object. Usually when we do that now, so just to start a discussion or a fist fight, when we do when we say one trigger per object, we have a trigger handler, and that trigger handler has 5 different conditions, 10 different conditions in it. Is update, is insert, and then we branch out to a bunch of other class helper files. I don't feel like that's really any different than if you have an insert class, if you have an update class, if you had 4 triggers, 1 for each action, or if you had 2 flows, 1 for create and 1 update. I feel like it's a little bit old school to go 1 per object, and I'm not a heavy duty Apex, and I will defer to you, of course. But as long as you manage it well, as long as you're not doing infinite objects or unlimited objects, I think any structure is good, and 1 is a little hard for me to swallow, and it seems a little arbitrary.
So definitely there is a different trigger frameworks are available, right? One, what you are talking about is one trigger per object. That is actually good. But some people write one Apex class for each event. In that, it's really hard to maintain, but there is other way around. It's that pattern is really good if you are using the unlock packaging structure, so that you will be not have the dependency when you're trying to make the different unlock packaging. But if you are not following, you are not getting the packaging, then I will be say go ahead with the one trigger per object, and you can have a single utility handle crash which can handle all the logics itself. So it's depend like different frameworks, different pattern, different strategies, which you can decide based on your need.
Cool, good stuff. Anybody else have any questions? I'm kind of monopolizing Amit's time.
There. Do you have enough time?
What,
Can you hear me?
you can only hear the,
Yeah. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, sorry, there's a little blip on my internet here. So one comment and a question followed by that. So I think, Amit, you mentioned when it comes to methods, a method should do one thing and that specific function only. So I've ran into scenarios where there was one method developed and it was doing one specific thing. 6 months fast forward in the future, it was doing multiple things. And then when asked the developer saying, hey, what happened? This method was supposed to do X, and that's what the name of the method says, do X. But when I look at the code, it now has multiple things doing. What's going on there? To that, the response was, well, you already had that one for loop running. So I just added my piece of function there so that I don't have to start for loop all over again on that trigger.new, whatever that was, right? So what's your take on following this practice? Should I? Yeah.
I specifically use this example in my presentation, right? If you remember what I did, I used the same code outside and calling the different method from the that for loop itself. So in that particular way, my logic is separated into the method, but I'm using the same for loop so that I'm saving the CPU time limit. So if you remember my slide, I give you one example, okay, how to write it, and another example I specifically show to trade off the for loop.
Gotcha. So basically readability, and at the same time, you're also not making that overall class expensive by running multiple fors. You still have one for loop, but kind of separating out that functionality by method.
Exactly. So let me see if I can share my screen again to show you that one. So let me share my screen again.
Yep, we can see your
So
screen.
if you see this, like this is what the specific example I say. I write the for loop, but from the for loop, I was in the 4 different methods. And each method is doing one functionality at a time, but I'm not using the same for loop again and again.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yep.
Thank you.
And this is very basic issue which start over the time. That's why I specifically added this example in my code. This is the only example I had it in the code to be very frank with presentation.
Your presentation also covered clean queries, right? Trying to make them very selective and all those things. Earlier, we were talking about my org is extremely large, has millions and millions and millions of records. So we work a lot with the Salesforce team to also create skinny tables, which has tremendously improved our queries, right? Because our data set is so large, and again, all the fields that we have going. But one of the things that I've had a challenge with is I don't know what fields are in the skinny tables. I've asked, but it's not something that's shared, right? I can tell when a query runs faster because I can tell it's hitting a skinny table because it runs very fast, but I don't know what's in there. Any insight there?
Yeah, definitely. So I will say like having the skinny table is definitely good, but I will say don't go ahead directly with the skinny table. It doesn't mean if you're using the skinny table that will be increase the performance. It actually downgrade your performance as well. So I had an experience into that. So I will say that I have a checklist. I will love to share with you before look into that, because you cannot, there's a lots of limitations, but look into that before considering for the skinny table.
Yeah, that'd be great if you can share the checklist, and you and I are connected on LinkedIn because we use them a lot. We just have so many records. We have REST services that call in. Salesforce for us is our system of record for customer, so it gets used quite heavily.
Yep. So
I think that would make a great topic for another session. Is
Yep.
selectability in large record sets. That sounds amazing. I've been struggling with that. That's part of my infinite event flow pattern. And I'm very interested to hear what you guys would have to say about how to work with large data sets and large record sets.
So I will say, like, if you're looking for it, like I have a really good, great session already available into ApexHours YouTube channel, and that is done by great CTAs and architects. So I will highly recommend it. Look into that. So there was one session done by Nitesh Mishri. He really included lots of great points, specifically skinny table, what you should consider, what you should not consider, and how to handle the large data volume. And there was another session also available on handling the large data volume by your query, that was done by Jitendra Jha, that he included lots of things when you are writing the code, how the indexing will be worked out, how that different things will work out. So that's really great session. And I will say, if you're right, if you want to deal with the query, just look into that session. It's really awesome.
Yeah, Amit, if I couldn't redo sessions that you'd already done, I wouldn't have a user group. Would you just give me a list of the topics you haven't covered on ApexHours yet? And then so I'll have that for my next topic. There's got to be at least 3.
I will be quiet then.
One day I'm going to find something that Amit doesn't have a session on. I'm going to learn that and be the best at it.
It's
So
all
this
about
is,
you.
this is somewhat related. Do you have a session on lookup skew? And the reason I'm asking is because the data structure that we started with, I'll give you an example. I have one object that has 8 records in it.
Mhm.
And those 8 records are associated to, my best guess is about 2 billion records.
Mhm.
They're all lookups. All the lookups are set to be annulled if that record gets deleted, right? So it's the best way to set up a lookup, but I'm working with Salesforce team to talk about how we can get away from this data structure, because 8 records tied to millions and millions of records is a bad idea, right? But if you have any knowledge there, I would love to tap into that too.
So what do you want, like if you delete the parent, then lookup child will be deleted, or child should
No,
blank?
no, these are lookups. These are not child master. These are not child parent. So these are just straight lookups, but I have 8 records that are tied to millions and millions of records.
I got you.
Yeah. And so I know, like we were talking about queries and making them selective and all those things. When we're setting that up, that's a problem. One of the developers just created a new object and he was about to do a lookup to that table again. I told him, no, there's no reason to make that a lookup. Just make it a pick list field. That's what it should have been all along anyway. And that's the way that table will be set up. But I want to say maybe 15 tables that are related to that lookup that I have to go clean up. So.
Yep. I got your point.
I have a fun job.
Yeah,
You definitely have a fun project.
It's a session. You're on the hook, Marlene. I think it's like October now.
I need to keep working with my AWS team to get that figured out. Once I have that figured out, I would gladly share everything that I've learned, because it has been a bit of a challenge. So I keep telling them, I know Salesforce. I need them to help me with the AWS side.
Understood. I will reach out. I'll see if I can find something, because there's been a lot of talk on that, and I'm about to head into mega record hell as well. So all of your scars are going to help me. So.
I wish I could use Heroku. I know that would be very performant for me, but it's not an option for me. So.
Okay. Cool. Anybody else have any questions? Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amit. I really appreciate it. Thank you. We had an amazing turnout here, all 3 of everybody. And as soon as we close the Zoom meeting, I will get to the cash prize for showing up. So thank you, everybody. I've got a duffel bag full of cash and Bitcoin certificates. But thanks everybody online for joining as well. I appreciate all the input. Thank you for suffering through all the technical difficulties as we get this going and keep it hybrid. I'm glad we're starting to build up both sides of the audience. So thank you, and we'll see you next month. Thank you so much, Amit. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Awesome, Shafin, Amit.